Document dump has U.S. intelligence officials hunting for the leaker. Documents detailing U.S. efforts to turn smartphones, smart TVs, and computers into spy tools. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. It is being called another catastrophic breach for the U.S. intelligence community at the hands of WikiLeaks tonight. Thousands of documents and files on how the CIA uses cyberspace to spy on the bad guys and maybe even some of the good guys, too, using the Internet of Things and devices in homes around the world. It has the intelligence community on a hunt for the leaker of sensitive tradecraft and detailed computer code. Correspondent Benjamin Hall in London tonight with a story that continues to develop at this hour.
The CIA can hack our televisions. This just one of the many revelations breaking from a new WikiLeaks dump of thousands of apparent CIA secrets. Fugitive Julian Assange and his secret spilling organization has posted over 8,000 documents online, which they claim show how government spies can penetrate, infest, and control phones, computers, even self-driving cars. Experts say exposing tradecraft like this is a major blow.
When you lose this capability, which you will when your adversaries discover what you're doing, it's a real compromise and it's really damaging.
The CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence is based in Langley. WikiLeaks say the documents were obtained from a, quote, isolated high-security network at the facility. The trove, bearing names such as Assassin and Medusa, had been circulated among former U.S. government hackers and contractors, one of whom, quote, recently gave the archive to WikiLeaks. Among the disclosures that some CIA hacking methods could be made to appear as if the hacks were perpetrated by other countries, including, as named in the documents, Russia. Apple was also supposedly targeted, amid claims the CIA has an entire division devoted to hacking Apple products, as well as the ability to bypass encrypted messages. A reminder that it took the government months to finally get into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone. If this intel is legit, and analysts believe it is, it would be another hit to the U.S. intelligence community, courtesy of WikiLeaks. And a source that has worked in this very cyber unit tells Fox News that the agency is now desperately searching for that man or person who gave the secrets away because they are so very sensitive. Brett?
More on this with the panel. Benjamin Hall in London. Benjamin, thank you. President Trump is being challenged tonight on another Twitter announcement that brought almost instant derision or questions. The president is criticizing the man he replaced for supposedly releasing dozens of terror suspects from Guantanamo Bay who have returned to the battlefield. For many, the numbers didn't add up. The White House had to clarify today. The same is true for the GOP effort at repealing and replacing Obamacare. A lot of questions about that as well. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us now with another filled day from the White House, North Lawn. Good evening, John.
It's always a full day here, Brett. Good evening to you. The White House today portrayed the new health care bill as phase one in a comprehensive process, trying to keep the messaging here today as positive as possible. Standing beneath the portrait of the woman he vanquished in the election, President Trump welcomed the first tour group since his inauguration to the White House.
Work hard, everybody. Work hard.
The president is anxious to get back on track after the latest blow-up in the Russia controversy and his accusations of wiretapping that left even the president's staff scratching their heads as to what he was talking about. The move to repeal and replace Obamacare is President Trump's first big legislative initiative. This afternoon, he met with the congressional team that will whip the Republican votes to get it through the House.
I'm proud to support the replacement plan released by the House of Representatives and encouraged by members of both parties. I think really that we're going to have something that's going to be much more understood and much more popular than people can even imagine.
But the White House is scrambling to quell fierce opposition from conservative Republicans who say it's still Obamacare, just in a different form. The president's HHS secretary left to defend the tax credit that replaces the Obamacare subsidy for low-income earners.
The central part of it, which is tax credits, which they see as yet another entitlement, very similar to the entitlement of Obamacare, they're different in form. How do you convince them, since it's going to take tax credits to make this work, that they need to swallow this and move forward with the bill? I mean, you're getting an awful lot of opposition.
And we, conservatives and others, have said for a long, long time that we believe it's important to equalize the tax treatment for those purchasing coverage, gaining coverage through their employer, and those not. And the tax credit is the opportunity to be able to equalize that tax treatment.
The president himself handled the messaging after it was pointed out two of his big campaign promises, selling insurance across state lines and negotiating lower drug prices, weren't in this bill. The president tweeting, "Don't worry, getting rid of state lines, which will promote competition, will be in phase 2 and 3 of healthcare rollout. And I am working on a new system where there will be competition in the drug industry. Pricing for the American people will come way down." But the president fumbled an attack against his predecessor today when he took aim at the Obama administration's release of prisoners from Guantanamo Bay. The president tweeting, 122 vicious prisoners released by the Obama administration from Gitmo have returned to the battlefield. Just another terrible decision. The problem, the Pentagon says of the 121 prisoners confirmed to have returned to the battlefield, only 8 were released by the Obama administration. The rest were released by President Bush.
Obviously, the president meant in totality the number that had been released on the battlefield, that have been released from Gitmo since individuals have been released.
And just as the furor over Russia was beginning to die down, the president stirred the pot again today, tweeting, "For 8 years, Russia ran over President Obama, got stronger and stronger, picked off Crimea, and added missiles. Weak." The White House offered no new evidence today to back up the president's assertion on Saturday that President Obama had ordered wiretapping of Trump Tower. The staff just kept saying this is now in the hands of the Congressional Intelligence Committees, where, frankly, Brett, they hope it will quietly go away. We'll see. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. There's much more debate than usual tonight over the confirmation of the man who would be second in command at the Justice Department. That's because he could be the decision maker on any investigation into President Trump, his campaign, and alleged ties to Russia. Here's Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
The federal probe into Russian meddling of the November elections dominated the confirmation hearing for Deputy Attorney General.
Is there any basis on which you would not be able to handle such these investigations?
I'm not aware of any requirement for me to recuse at this time.
Leaving the door open for a special prosecutor was not enough for Democrats after the resignation of National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and the recusal of Attorney General Sessions over their Russian contacts.
We are in an extraordinary time, careening toward a constitutional crisis.
I cannot remember anything in my years here that's troubled me more.
We need steel spines, not weak knees, when it comes to political independence in the Department of Justice.
If it's America against Russia or America against any other country, I think everyone in this room knows which side I'm on.
Rod Rosenstein is politically neutral, with 27 years in the Justice Department, working in the broader Whitewater probe before being appointed a U.S. attorney by President George W. Bush and being retained in the post by President Obama. But Republicans said that resume was still not enough for Democrats.
But then my colleagues here ask you whether you'll abdicate those responsibilities without even knowing the evidence and appoint a special counsel.
And Republicans called out Democrats who did not press former Attorney General Loretta Lynch to recuse herself after meeting with Bill Clinton during the FBI's probe of Hillary Clinton's email server.
This kind of double standard makes it at least look like partisan politics.
Both parties questioned Rosenstein on President Trump's weekend claims that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower.
If the president is exercising his First Amendment rights, that's not my issue.
No president can just unilaterally say, go wiretap that American citizen.
And I agree with you that that would not happen.
Do you pledge to continue to pursue any ongoing investigation by the Justice Department into Russian interference in the 2016 election?
Absolutely, I would support it.
I want you to look me in the eye
and tell me that you'll do it right.
But the January testimony from Attorney General Sessions, where he did not disclose 2 prior meetings with the Russian ambassador, hung like a dark cloud over the hearing.
For him to put this in his letter as a response is insulting. And he should come back and explain himself.
I consider what Senator Franken asked Sessions at that late moment, that story just come out, as a gotcha question.
And Senator Grassley emphasized as the hearing concluded that there is still no evidence of collusion between Trump campaign associates and Russian intelligence. If no charges are brought, there was a bipartisan call for the findings to be made public. Brett.
Captain, thank you.
Welcome.
The Obamacare repeal and replace legislation is getting serious pushback from both ends of the political spectrum tonight. It's called the American Health Care Act. Conservatives say it does not go far enough. Democrats say it goes too far. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live tonight on Capitol Hill with reaction on all sides. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. 24 hours after unveiling their plan to repeal and replace Obamacare, top Trump administration officials and leaders here on Capitol Hill are now selling it. Late today, House Speaker Paul Ryan said he guarantees it will have the votes to pass.
Doing big things is never easy, but we have made a promise, and we're going to keep that promise.
With their first major legislative priority under attack from some on the right and left, Vice President Mike Pence came to the defense of the GOP health care plan.
This is the bill, and the President supports the American Health Care Act and looks forward to working very directly with leadership of the House and Senate to move this bill.
A letter from HHS Secretary Tom Price to lawmakers explained this is a first step since selling insurance across state lines and negotiating drug costs could not be included in this kind of reconciliation measure. Earlier, Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady pushed GOP colleagues to get on board.
As Republicans, we have a choice. We can act now, or we can keep fiddling around and squander this opportunity to repeal Obamacare.
Outside conservative groups Heritage Action and Club for Growth blasted the proposal, and late today members of the House Freedom Caucus and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul called for voting on a straight Obamacare repeal since they're opposed to this package.
We are divided. We have to admit we are divided on replacement. We are united on repeal, but we are divided on replacement.
There's a leadership plan that was brought forward, which I believe, when you look through it, is Obamacare in a different form.
Earlier, Energy and Commerce Chairman Greg Walden tried to defend it.
These are big measures moving forward. We've certainly met the test of the president and Secretary Price, who believe this is repeal and reform.
House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi is demanding to know the price tag from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, writing to Speaker Paul Ryan today, quote, "The American people and members have a right to know the full impact of this legislation before any vote in committee or by the whole House." And the Senate's top Democrats sounded eager to tie this proposal to the new president.
Trump Care will make health insurance in America measurably worse in just about every way and leave more Americans uninsured.
This is setting up as a showdown where White House and top congressional leaders dare rank-and-file conservatives to oppose the bill, making the case that would violate their campaign pledges and end up saving Obamacare. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thank you. A new Congressional Budget Office study says the Trump administration and its GOP allies in Congress will not have to act until sometime this fall to increase the government's borrowing limit. Current law permits the administration to freely borrow through March 15th. The Treasury Department is permitted to use a variety of bookkeeping maneuvers, what the CBO calls extraordinary measures, to continue to finance government operations after that. Stocks were down again today. The Dow lost 30. The S&P 500 dropped 7. The Nasdaq fell 15. President Trump met with the nation's top labor union official today at the White House. It is the latest move in a political relationship that has been hot and cold. Tonight, Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen shows us why. Good evening, James.
Brett, good evening. We were all set for cameras to be allowed into the Oval Office to record a portion of the Trump-Trumka summit. Late today, without explanation, the White House said the meeting was still on, but news coverage was blacked out. Perhaps a reflection that these two titans of their respective fields felt they could accomplish more in private.
I'm sorry that we did not win this election.
It was hardly a surprise that on her way to losing the presidency, Hillary Clinton won the Union labor vote, but Clinton's 51% to Donald Trump's 42% marked a 5-point drop-off from the share commanded by President Obama in 2012.
We're going to fight for you like I promised I would in the campaign.
Sensing an opening, President Trump has courted labor, as when he invited miners to the White House last month to watch him sign a law rolling back an Obama-era regulation on the coal industry.
Everything that you're doing for our industry is very much needed.
The head of the AFL-CIO said that for his rank and file, the first billionaire businessman to become chief executive has thus far presented a mixed bag.
What he did on TPP was good. The thing he's trying to do with infrastructure is good. There's a lot of those things. And then on the other side, he put some people in that were pretty anti-union.
The head of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, which boasts 1.4 million members, broke with the Obama administration on the Keystone Pipeline and pointedly declined to endorse Hillary Clinton during the Democratic primaries. Now the group is keeping an open mind about Donald Trump.
We want the American worker to be successful, and if that includes working with the president, we certainly will do that. He is the president, and we intend to work with him where we can.
I, Richard Nixon, do solemnly swear.
The only time a Republican nominee has won the labor vote was President Nixon's landslide re-election in 1972. Ronald Reagan in 1980 came close, falling 3 points shy. Brad Blakeman, a former aide to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, is working privately to strengthen the ties between big labor and the Republican Party.
They're giving this president the benefit of the doubt to wait and see what his infrastructure program is going to look like, what trade is going to look like, what relations between Mexico are going to look like, especially Mexican trucking, for instance, coming into our country.
Last year, according to federal statistics, the number of wage and salary workers belonging to unions declined to about 14.5 million. The peak of American union membership was the mid-1950s, Brett, when more than 1/3 of all wage and salary workers belonged to one.
A shifting coalition.
Perhaps.
James, thanks. The U.S. is moving state-of-the-art missile defense equipment to South Korea in response to more missile testing from North Korea. That is causing major blowback from China. Correspondent Rich Edson explains from the State Department tonight.
The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, an American system designed to intercept and destroy incoming missiles. After another series of North Korean missile launches into the Sea of Japan, the United States has deployed this system to South Korea and is reassuring an alarmed Chinese government these missiles are only defensive.
I think we've been very clear that THAAD, which is what they're referring to, is clearly a defensive system. The reason we're pursuing this implementation or deployment of THAAD with South Korea is because of North Korea's continued, for lack of a better term, bad behavior.
Despite the U.S. reassurances, China strongly opposes the deployment and is already retaliating economically, closing nearly 24 stores in China owned by a South Korean conglomerate. That company agreed to allow the South Korean government to deploy the missile defense system on land it owns. The Chinese government also threatens the U.S. is beginning a regional arms race.
We will surely take necessary measures to safeguard our own security interest. The United States and the ROK will bear all the consequence arising therefrom.
The U.S. has long considered, and China long opposed, deploying this system to South Korea. The U.S. announced it was doing so one day after North Korea launched 4 missiles into the South China Sea. Despite international condemnation and sanctions, North Korea continues developing its ballistic missile and nuclear programs. Since 2006, it has successfully achieved 5 nuclear explosions and routinely fires ballistic missiles. Next week, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will travel to Japan, South Korea, and China. The State Department says he will discuss moving beyond sanctions to deter North Korean behavior.
And it's getting to the point where we do need to look at other alternatives, and that's part of what this trip is about.
The Trump administration has repeatedly requested China deter its ally, North Korea, from continuing its nuclear and missile programs. It wants China to fully implement sanctions against North Korea.
In claiming an unprecedented penalty, the United States has announced a settlement with ZTE. It's a Chinese technology company. It'll cost ZTE more than $1 billion. The offense, selling banned technology to Iran and violating U.S. sanctions. Brett.
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thanks. Up next, why it's possible you may not see many women at your job tomorrow. We'll explain. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 10 in Phoenix, as a judge awards an Army veteran $2.5 million in a malpractice suit against the Phoenix VA hospital. Stephen Cooper has terminal prostate cancer. He contends his medical practitioner failed to follow up on an abnormal prostate exam. Cooper is said to have less than 5 years to live. Fox 40 in Jackson, Mississippi, as a train collides with a charter bus in Biloxi. Officials say at least 4 people are dead and 35 hurt. Witnesses said the bus appeared to be stuck on the tracks and the eastbound train hit the bus broadside. And this is a live look at Denver from our affiliate, Fox 31. One of the big stories there tonight, a grass fire burning in northeastern Colorado has destroyed 4 homes and damaged multiple other homes and outbuildings. If you have a lot of women in your workplace, things might be a little less crowded for you tomorrow. That's because many women are saying they're taking the day off as a way to send a message. But some others say the protest is a misguided effort that may cause more problems. Correspondent Kristen Fisher takes a look.
When millions marched across the country for women's rights the day after President Trump took office, it was likely the largest single-day demonstration ever recorded in U.S. history. Now, nearly halfway into his first 100 days, the same group that organized the Women's March is preparing to strike.
This is an important message regarding the closing of all ACPS schools this Wednesday.
Alexandria City Public Schools in Virginia is one of 2 school districts that will be closed tomorrow in response to this Day Without Women. A voicemail that went out yesterday to a Fox News employee, as well as all parents with kids in the district, explains that more than 300 staff members have requested Wednesday off.
The decision is based solely on our ability to provide sufficient staff to cover all of our classrooms. It is not based on a political stance or position.
The strike's organizers insist that it's not necessarily a protest against President Trump.
We need America to feel what a day without a woman would feel like.
But critics of the strike aren't buying it, especially since the Conservative Media Research Center claims that liberal billionaire George Soros has donated millions to their partners. Not to mention, nearly 76% of Alexandria's residents voted for Hillary Clinton.
I mean, this is a district that overwhelmingly voted for Hillary Clinton, so I think that, they're just so steeped in anti-Donald Trumpism that they would be very quick to pull the plug on school in order to enable their teachers to miss a day of work.
Pulling the plug in Alexandria means that 15,000 students will be staying home from school tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lotus, and I think this disproportionately hurts single moms who rely on the educational system and public schools in particular in order to watch their kids while they're able to go to school.
Organizers say the school closures were not expected, and that if you can't afford to strike, don't.
There are many ways you can be in solidarity with women. You can wear red on tomorrow. You can shop in women-owned businesses. And, there are many ways to show your solidarity without putting your job on the line.
But critics argue that it's not about those who can't afford to strike. It's about those who can't afford for others to strike. Brett?
Kristen, thank you. A federal judge has declined to temporarily stop construction of the final section of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The developer is finishing up work and says it could be moving oil through that pipeline as early as next week. Native American groups continue to go to court to try to stop it. Bidding starts tomorrow for contractors who want a piece of President Trump's southern border wall and the billions of dollars that will be spent to build it. National correspondent William Lajness tells us what's involved in that process.
We will soon begin the construction of a great wall along our southern border.
That process begins Wednesday when the administration entertains bids to design and build a wall on the Mexican border, 30 feet tall and resistant to climbing, tampering, or damage. Preferably concrete, but it could be steel or both. A prototype is due in 2 weeks, with a firm proposal, including price, due in May.
The border wall is unwise, immoral, ineffective.
Most Democrats today oppose Trump's wall, but that wasn't the case a decade ago when they overwhelmingly supported President Bush's $2 billion border barrier, including then-Senator Barack Obama.
It will authorize some badly needed funding for better fences,
and better security along our borders.
But the 2006 Secure Fence Act ran out of money. Instead of 700 miles of double fencing, as called for, agents got 350 of mostly single-layer fence. Some argue Trump is simply finishing what Bush started.
It's important to understand that every border is different.
Magal Security in Israel has built barriers around the world. Most include sensors that detect vibration and noise to alert agents to intruders. The company is expected to bid on the U.S. wall.
There is no solution that fits all. You have to take the various technologies that exist today in order to tailor the right solution to the right threat.
Sources say a likely configuration would use existing fence to slow down would-be immigrants, an access road, and the new barrier as a secondary fence to stop them. As to where the wall goes first, I am told that several sections will be built simultaneously, one likely near El Centro, California, between already fortified Yuma and San Diego. Brett?
William, thank you. Overseas, U.S.-backed Iraqi forces are fighting their way through a government complex in the heart of western Mosul. This comes after the Iraqis stormed the buildings in an overnight raid. They're facing fierce counterattacks from ISIS terrorists. It's the latest advance in a two-week campaign to clear Mosul's western side of extremists and terrorists who once controlled nearly a third of the country. We are learning more tonight about just how young people are indoctrinated into a culture of hate, such as ISIS. Correspondent John Huddy reports it starts early and goes by the book.
The textbooks are titled English for the Islamic State. Iraqi troops found them at an orphanage when they liberated eastern Mosul in February. But these are unlike the school books you and I grew up with. In the alphabet, the letter B is for bomb, G for gun. The letter S is for sniper, presumably an ISIS fighter aiming his weapon. The letter W, or woman, shows an indiscernible black figure, most likely a burqa-clad woman. And then there are the pictures of AK-47s and bombs used for math exercises.
Children that live in these violent zones, this makes their brain very open, very susceptible to propaganda, to influences.
The orphanage where the ISIS textbooks were found was used to groom children to become ISIS soldiers or informants, according to Iraqi military officials. Ruth Feldman is a child psychologist at Bar-Ilan University in Tel Aviv who has counseled children traumatized by war and terrorism. She says the toxic education of these so-called cubs of the caliphate only stokes the anxiety of living in a harsh environment, making these children easy prey.
Those messages in the textbook help them divide the world into two. We are the just one, the right one. They are the enemy. They are wrong. They are hateful. They need to be killed. And this is how children grow on violence and hatred.
The NGO Save the Children estimates that more than 1 million children living under ISIS rule in Iraq have either been forced out of school or forced to follow the terror group's perverse curriculum that, in the more advanced courses, train students on how to make suicide bombs and beheading techniques. Brett?
John Huddy in our Middle East newsroom. John, thank you. The Pentagon is investigating reports that some U.S. Marines shared naked photographs of their female colleagues, veterans, and other women on a secret Facebook page. It's believed the group had 30,000 members. One report says more than 24 active duty women were identified by their rank, full name, and location in those photographs. The Florida mother who was acquitted of murdering her 2-year-old daughter 6 years ago is breaking her silence tonight. Casey Anthony insists she still does not know how her child was killed. Anthony spoke with a reporter from the Associated Press. Her daughter Kaylee would be 12 years old if she were alive today. As for her own legacy, Casey Anthony says, quote, "I don't give an expletive about what anyone thinks about me. I never will. I'm okay with myself. I sleep pretty good at night." Is the messaging coming out of the White House mixed or on the same page on a host of issues?
It looks like a very extensive file of the tactics, techniques, procedures, targets, and political rules under which the Central Intelligence Agency conducts its computer network exploitation and other activities. So if it is that, it would be very, very damaging. This is about foreign intelligence collection. This doesn't invoke the privacy rights of Americans.
These appear to be very, very serious. But at this time, that's really all the information that I have on it, just to say that we are extremely concerned and we are following it closely.
Well, WikiLeaks out with document dumps, some 8,000 documents that detail CIA efforts to spy. Among the programs, according to the New York Times and others, we've seen some of these documents. Another program described in the documents is called Umbrage, is a voluminous library of cyber attack techniques that the CIA has collected from malware produced by other countries, including Russia. According to the WikiLeaks release, the large number of techniques allows the CIA to mask the origin of some of its cyber attacks and confuse forensic investigators. Edward Snowden, who has been quiet lately, tweeted out today, "What makes this look real? Program and office names such as JOJ, IOC, Crypt series are real. Only a cleared insider could know them." He goes on. Bottom line, the U.S. intelligence community is in an uproar tonight and looking for a leaker. Let's bring in our panel. Michael Needham is Chief Executive Officer at Heritage Action for America. A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor at Real Clear Politics, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. You know, Michael, we have seen this before about WikiLeaks document dumps, but boy, this looks very detailed, and everything we're hearing from the intelligence community is it's authentic.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. It may mean that we have another Edward Snowden inside our intelligence agencies, and that's something that should be very concerning to all Americans. It's not surprising that there's lots of intelligence programs out there that we don't know about. That's a good thing. I think what's most concerning is that if WikiLeaks can get access to some of this information, what do the Russians know? What do the Chinese know? And what does that mean for the effectiveness of some of these important programs?
A.B., you saw Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee chair, not talk a lot about it, but also in here are ways that the CIA can make smart TVs and smartphones spy tools. You know, cars, computerized cars, have access to them.
It's frightening, chilling stuff. Obviously the kind of technology that we want to spy on other countries, but it sparks a debate every time there are revelations like this, even those that have been far less dramatic about what could happen here and what could happen to our own privacy in the country. It really is staggering how much the Snowden revelations and these types of revelations set us back in terms of revealing our sources and methods, set us back with our adversaries and our work in intelligence around the world. And with so much, we lose 10, 15 years of work at a time, an incredible amount of resources.
And Charles, obviously Trump supporters, their eyes perked up when they saw the cloaking of hacks that could be blamed on Russia that were really internal, and obviously people saying, what does that all mean? But bottom line, it's a serious breach.
Look, I can see how it can open up a hall of mirrors about the cloaking and disguising the so-called attacks on our democratic system. But the real story is, I think that this is worse than Snowden. It's one thing to disclose names and places and even operations, but once you're describing the sources and methods, that's the key to what we do. And you've got to wonder, all the energy that we spend on the vetting of, I don't know, Yemeni nationals trying to get into the country, ought we not be spending a bit more of our time and effort on the vetting of contractors? Snowden was a contractor for NSA. Presumably this person who's leaking, or persons, were contractors for CIA. This, I think, is our greatest weakness. A.B. is right. We could have lost a decade of this. But I will commend the CIA for one thing, their creativity and code names. Umbrage is a beauty.
And we should point out that U.S. intelligence officials tell our own James Rosen that they had a lot of very high-tech security measures that they're trying to figure out how that was all breached at this moment tonight. Let's take a listen to Sean Spicer answering a question about the president's talk about wiretapping today.
If he's sitting on this information that he found out, he's now directing or asking or recommending that the intelligence committees look into this. And you talked about they have resources and staff, which they do.
Right.
But why expend those resources and staff if the president found out this information and hasn't?
I think there's a difference between directing the Department of Justice, which may be involved in an ongoing investigation, and asking Congress as a separate body to look into something and add credibility to the look adds an element that wouldn't necessarily be there if we were directing the Department of Justice, for example.
Michael, your thoughts on this as we continue to kind of get the reverberations from the weekend tweets?
Right. Well, the whole wiretapping story depends on what the truth is, and that's why I think it is prudent to have the investigation to get the facts out there. Obviously, if the relationship between the president and Russia is anything near what the left alleges, that would be horribly concerning. I think it seems somewhat fantastical. On the other hand, and I think part of the reason the president and so many others are getting as angry about this situation as they are is it is also extremely concerning if there's a constant drip, drip, drip out of the intelligence community of information used to undermine a president that they don't like, to undermine other political leaders that they don't like. And that's not what America should be about. And so I think it's important for us to get the facts. The facts will tell us what's going on here and what's at fault, and that's why I think that some sort of investigation is important.
Let's stipulate that perhaps the president, even though he tweeted it directly about President Obama, was saying the Obama administration. Let's just stipulate that as for conversation. Here is Devin Nunes talking about those tweets.
The president is a neophyte to politics. He's been doing this a little over a year. And I think a lot of the things that he says, you guys sometimes take literally. Sometimes he doesn't have 27 lawyers and staff looking at what he does, which is, I think, at times refreshing, and at times can also lead us to have to be sitting at a press conference like this answering questions that you guys are asking.
But they are words, and words matter when they come from the Oval Office.
You know, if they don't matter for the commander-in-chief, then I don't know what will. Devin Nunes is a respected member. It must have been a tough day for him to tell the media that we shouldn't take the words of the leader of the free world literally. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a reckless claim. The Republicans know it. Even if it was true, you don't make it on Twitter. You don't make accusations like that or observations like that. He could have talked to the FBI. He didn't.
Where do you think this goes, Charles?
I think it goes nowhere. I think this is chasing our tails. This is going down a rabbit hole. And if I were looking for something beyond anger to explain the president having tweeted this, anger at his staff, anger at the situation, it would be that this is a guy who has said all along, I don't attack, I counterattack. When he was a businessman and he was sued, what did he do? He would countersue. You muddy it up, you end up in endless litigation, and then it disappears. I think he thinks, and it probably is true, this is going to end up as part of the Russian investigation. There is no evidence that any of this happened, the wiretap. On the other hand, there is no evidence yet that there was any attempt or collusion of the Trump campaign with the Russians. So we have a double investigation with no evidence. This, I think, we're going to look back on a year from now and think, what the hell were we doing?
Final thing, Lindsey Graham, one of the president during the campaign's biggest opponents, senator from South Carolina, was at the White House today, and he had lunch with the president, said, I had a great lunch meeting with President Trump today. He is strongly committed to rebuilding our military, which is music to my ears. President Trump is in deal-making mode, and I hope Congress is like-minded. How good was the meeting? I gave him my new cell phone number. You'll remember he gave him... Candidate Trump gave out Lindsey Graham's cell phone number in the campaign. Next up, the fallout from the Republican answer to Obamacare.